Effective and efficient teams, part 2. Because I don't want you sitting around in meetings or being part of teams and wasting your time when you're not working effectively to get a goal and you're not working efficiently. So I guess it's a silly question to ask if you've ever been part of a team, because I think we all have. And I think you've all been part of effective teams, hopefully. And I think you've all been part of very ineffective, time-wasting teams. So part 1 focused on 3 characteristics of effective, efficient teams. Today we're going to jump into team functioning. So let's get going. Effective and efficient teams start off with what I spoke about during part 1, having a vision and mission. You have to have that in place. Ideally, have it written down that everyone sees it and faces it every single meeting. But just saying every meeting talks about that first piece. Expectations for attendance. What are they? Is this written down someplace? Are you supposed to attend every single meeting? Can you just show up when you can? Can you participate virtually? Can you miss a meeting? But then if you miss a meeting, how do you catch up on what went on? And what's your responsibility then to be able to contribute and catch up on the things that happened during the meeting when you weren't there? Do you see why it's important? What are those expectations for attendance? The next piece is, what about the roles and responsibilities for everyone on the team? Who is the main kind of chairperson or coordinator or facilitator who serves the function of making sure that the team is scheduled, that agendas go out, that when we get to the meeting, we navigate through those agenda topics and we don't deviate too far or without team agreement? Who is that key person? Doesn't own the team, but helps keep the team on track. Do you have a person? And what exactly are their behaviors, roles, and functions? How about the note taker? I talked about earlier about what happens if you miss a meeting. How would you know what happened if there's not notes taken on that piece there? The idea here is we need to have a note taker. We need to have someone who's taking down the critical pieces of information, the hot topics, the decisions, the rationales for that. It does not have to be minute details. It can just be the main key points and the decisions and actions from that part. The other critical piece is that at the end, that person then can go back and say, these were the action items that we will need to follow up on, and here are the people who are assigned to do that and by when. If that's all documented and recorded, just think about your next meeting. You start off with those and think about the status and what needs to happen next. Notes are important. Some teams like to have a timekeeper too, just to keep you on track. It doesn't mean that sometimes you can't go a little bit over with agreement of the rest of the team if that is the way your team functions and works. But the key piece is here knowing that if we only have 5 minutes to talk about this because we have 6 other items on our agenda that are equally as important, we have someone letting us know, okay, we have 1 minute left on here. We have about 30 seconds left on here. There is someone who is doing that. And it's very difficult for it to also be the facilitator. So it's sometimes nice to have a second person be the timekeeper. Another very critical role is the liaison between the team and other entities, other teaming infrastructures that make similar decisions, or with the people who do make those key decisions if some of those outcomes are outside the zone of authority of that team. Remember during part 1 we talked about we have to know, the team has to know, where is our decision making radius? Where do we have control and where do we have to touch on someone else to be able to make those decisions? We need to have someone identified. I talked about being kind of like the champion, the person who then communicates back and forth with external partners who are critical to decision making of that team. Key person. Other roles, responsibilities, you also might want someone who brings snacks, someone who makes sure that all the materials are set up beforehand, a technology person, the person who makes sure that the room is scheduled. Think about all those pieces. Sometimes those responsibilities can filter under other key players. We also want to really define what is it to be a member of the team, not just coming and showing up and nodding your head, unless that is really what you want your team members to be. My guess is not. What do you expect from a team member? Should they be contributing? Should they step forward and then step back when necessary? Should they be voting? Should they be following through? Should they be sharing content that's actionable? What do you expect of your members? I think also we talked about the attendance. How often should they be attending? Do you also rotate your roles? So you're a note taker for one meeting, the next meeting is someone else who's the note taker and someone else who's the timekeeper. Think about the processes for how you work. If you do all this before your team starts functioning, it's so much better than doing it piecemeal as you run into a barrier or you realize, oh, no one did take notes. Oh, that person here, oh, the person who's supposed to take notes isn't here, so I guess we don't get notes. Think ahead to be able to do some of these pieces. Sometimes it means taking 5 or 10 minutes at the front end of each of your meetings to start fleshing out these parts if it's already a teaming structure that's already engaged in really critical work. Really important. There's another piece. If your vision and mission is well established for this team, and I hope it has been, and if not, that's something you want to put right at the forefront, top agenda item on your meetings. If it is, then let's make sure every person knows why he or she or they are there. What are you contributing? Why were you selected? What knowledge and skills and experiences do you bring to here? What are your roles? What do we expect from you? Why is that? Isn't that the worst thing when someone says, I don't even know why I'm on that team? Or have you ever felt like that? I'm not even here. Why'd they ask me here? Should never, ever happen. It's the worst feeling in the world if you are a person who is managing a team and someone says that. I've been there and it's not right. We need to make sure everyone knows why they are part of that team. Why are they critical? Why were they selected? We also want to establish communication pathways. How is this team going to communicate internally across the team and externally? Internally is your note structure, is your agenda all housed in a shared drive? Is it sent out at a certain time period so that everyone can collaborate and contribute to it? How do you communicate? How do you share a status on a task or an action item that was given to you that you want to be able to let the team know that you're hitting barriers, you're slowed down, or it's been completed? Think about your communication. What's that process? Now also think about how do you communicate externally. Is there a key person who is your communication person who shares maybe key points that need to be put into a newsletter or what should be shared with a greater other team, or those key individuals that also participate in other teams that they all kind of work together, so those other teams need to know what's going on in your team. So who are those key people? And it really makes sense if you narrow that down. What are our communication talking points for these other spaces as part of your team meeting? Consistency, consistency, consistency. Do you have regularly scheduled meetings that happen every other Monday at 2 o'clock, the first Thursday at 9 a.m.? What is your pattern there? Consistency is going to be really important because it will really probably increase your attendance. If you start scheduling it that way, then people will already be able to indicate before, oh, 2 months from now, I'm not going to be able to be here. This is a conflict here. Here's this. And the idea is if you start building your team out a little bit, or you have ad hoc people that come and join your meetings, you already know when those meetings are happening. Consistency, attendance, how you're communicating, what you're sharing, forming your agenda items, all of those you want to have in a consistent pattern so that it's reliable. Just like when you begin and end your meetings, you also want to keep to that time frame. If you have 90 minutes for a meeting, you don't go on for 110 minutes of a meeting unless your team agrees, all of you, that you want to be able to keep working through there. If you end early, great. No one ever seems to mind about that. But the idea is we have a consistent time period. We don't have open-ended meetings. Those are the worst. No one ever likes those. Accountability. This is a really key piece. First of all, it drives from the idea of what is the vision and mission of this team. If the vision and mission of this team is to impact students' lives, is to impact how these materials are distributed to your customers, you always go back as a team. Are we doing the work that supports that goal? Because if this team is not doing something linked to your goal, your vision and mission, then guess what? Your team is not functioning in an effective way. It might be highly efficient, but it's not effective. So think about, is that vision and mission appropriate, or do you need to realign? The other piece of accountability is when you're given a task or an action item to do, make sure that we have a system to be able to document that it's done. A little bit of that fidelity. How will I know that this has been done, or how else will someone know that this task has been done? How are we going to communicate the status of a task or an action item? Is it just going to be updated on the notes when it's done, or are you going to be able to see evidence of it? But the idea here is if we say that we're going to do something, and by when, we all as a team, each and every member is accountable for anything that's assigned to you. And if a person who is going to be assigned a task is not at the meeting, do not leave that meeting without identifying the person who is present, who is going to share and notify the person who is not at the meeting that a task has been assigned to him or her. And that is all written down. It sounds silly, but how many times you say, I thought you were doing that. No, I was doing that. We want to avoid these challenges. Our work in any domain, whether it's education, whether it's business, whether it's something with social services, the idea our work is already enough. We don't need to make the idea of team functioning being a barrier in this as well too. Write down your team responsibilities, write down your vision and mission and the selection criteria of who you want at the table and when and why. Write down how you communicate, the attendance policies if you miss a meeting. Write everything down, the communication sound bites, how you're responding to different pieces, your zone of authority. Have it all written down. This not only keeps you accountable that way, but then as the team changes and new members matriculate on and some transition off, it's right there. It's an onboarding document. Sometimes we call these documents ways of work. Sometimes they're a charter agreement. Sometimes they're MOUs. Sometimes they're terms of reference. The idea is it's all written down, and then we can always be monitoring it. If it's not working, if it's not getting us effectively to our mission and goal, if it's not efficient, we can be effective but not efficient. We need both effective and efficient. If it's not getting us there, let's look back at how we are working and what we might be able to change. So critical. Write it down. Think about your team functioning. And let's get effective and efficient processes and procedures to be able to reach our vision and mission of our teams so they're not just another meeting that goes nowhere. If this has been helpful, and I hope it has, please go ahead, write comments, thoughts, feedback. I'm going to keep adding more. We need to talk about how we make effective, efficient work to be able to support our work in schools, businesses, or other entities. Go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit the like if this has been helpful. But importantly, leave comments, thoughts, and feedback down below. I'll have other links, especially the link to the part 1, and I look forward to continuing on with all of you.